Good morning, Rotary Club of Centennial.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Is that all you've got?
Good morning, Mr. President. John.
All right.
Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Before we get going, please silence your cell phones.
Sure.
Brad Hablitzel, I believe you are going to inspire us this morning.
Yes, please bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing all of us together to grow our friendships and grow together. 1 + 1 = 3 when we all work together to raise up our projects and come together cumulatively to get the work done and good things done in this world. So please give us humble hearts and allow us to find time in our schedules to be able to serve. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Charlie Jackson, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Cheryl, I think you've got the Rotary Minute.
Is this on?
It's on.
All right. Good morning, everyone. 113 years ago, the 4 members of Rotary's first club held their first meeting. Today, as in 1905, many of us come to Rotary seeking what Paul Harris sought: friendship, connections, a place to feel at home. But today, Rotary gives us so much more than it could ever have given its earliest members in those earliest days. The Rotary of today, more than 1.2 million members strong, lets us feel at home not only in a small group of our peers, but also in our diverse clubs across our communities and indeed throughout the world. None of us can know what lies ahead for Rotary. It remains for all of us to continue to build on the solid foundations that were laid for us by Paul Harris and his friends, to forge and strengthen the bonds of service and friendship through Rotary, making a difference.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure who set up this morning. I think John Peterson. Thanks for doing that. And then Tripp, he's got you listed as takedown again.
Bill.
Okay. Don Shattuck, reader today?
No,
Did you Tripp read it? Wow, I'm glad I got this stuff written down because I didn't have any of it right. Brad, I know this is right. Thanks for doing the inspiration today. And Charlie, thank you for leading the pledge. Visiting Rotarians, it looks like we have a couple of visiting Rotarians. We have Patricia Snip, did I say that right? And then Scott Davenport. What club are you guys from? Really?
Right.
And he came to be amongst our merry band of misfits. I like that.
Speak
Great.
for yourself.
And we have those. You know, we can do that without any problem. But welcome. Thanks for coming. Whole bunch of guests today. Mitch and Terry Mollett are over here. Terry was one of our speakers at the Opioid Symposium on Saturday. And Mitch is her faithful and loving husband. Roger Frame, where did you end up? Roger was at the Opioid Symposium as well, and he decided to come join us today. Rob Valek is our speaker. He's hiding in the back. You'll meet him a little bit later. And then Kevin McKessie. I saw Kevin earlier. There he is. Kevin has been visiting a couple times and has turned in his membership application. So let's get Kevin a big round of applause. Thank you, Kevin. So, Kevin, we will be voting on you at the board meeting next week. Tripp is the one who takes any and all bribes for us when it comes to the votes. I think Jacqueline Collins' birthday is today. Oh.
Ron Schuster.
Sorry, Ron. Ron Schuster, who was at Prime Timers last week. I didn't get a chance to write that down. Sorry, even though I talked to you. I apologize.
All those notes.
You know, I'm not up here for my memory, I can assure you.
He fits right into the car.
Thank you so much, Mr. McCarty, for that vote of confidence. I don't think we have any wedding anniversaries. Do we have any wedding anniversaries coming up in the next week? No. All right. Let's talk club updates. Flower Power, March 4th and 5th. We need a coordinating chair for the event. No one has volunteered yet. Who wants to be chosen? Yeah, okay, I'll track somebody down. We'll get that handled this week. Save the date, Rally for Kids, which is one of CASA's big fundraisers on Friday, April 3rd. We have 2 seats left at the table that Karen and I are hosting. April 13th? Thank you. April 13th. We have 2 seats left at our table. Let's talk about Saturday's Opioid Awareness Symposium. Phenomenal turnout. We collected 111 pounds of drugs in the drug take-back and 42 pounds of sharps, which are needles and that type of stuff. To tell you how it went, I walked up to the table at the end of the event, and there was a box with some drugs over here and a little bag, and I thought, oh, that's nice, and I was a little disappointed. And I said, well, that looks pretty good. And all of a sudden they reached under the table and pulled out a big green garbage bag, boom, on the table. I said, oh, that's even better. Reach under, another bag. Reach under, another bag. Reach under. 4 green garbage bags full of drugs that we collected. And we shared an awful lot of really good information, and Rob is going to be our speaker today. Just a note, Rob's got a whole lot of information, so we will almost certainly go over today in today's meeting. If you got to bail at 8:30, you got to bail, but I think if you have time to sit and listen, you'll pick up a lot of very important information. So, Randy.
Mr. President, did we get any press, or did we send out a press release on the opioid meeting that we had?
I have not seen any press, no.
All right. Where's the sheriff? Sheriff, did your PIO send out anything?
No, we did not, but our 2 PIOs have been working up in Adams.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay. So, John, if you want to just send me some information on that, I'll write up something and send it out as a brief after.
Okay. I can do that.
Send it to me, too.
Anyway, very, very heartwarming event. We had great attendance from Heritage Eagle Bend. They did an outstanding job, their emergency preparedness committee. And I even have to compliment Phil Chipouris, even though it's so hard for me to do so. Phil did a really, really good job on promoting the event within Heritage Eagle Bend. It went exceptionally well. For the committee members on that, we're going to schedule a post-event debrief pretty soon. So we can talk about what went right, what went wrong. Really, very little went wrong other than we need to schedule more time for the next event. But it was pretty exciting. Is Jeannie Henshin here today? I didn't see her. No, remember Jeannie talked last week about the Valentines for vets.
Yes.
I think those need to be turned in by the 9th.
By the 9th, yes.
So that's something to keep in mind if you want to participate in that. It's a very simple kind of do-it-yourself project, but something that we want to work on. Mary Alice, talk to us about prime timers with a microphone.
Hello?
And our 2 favorite visiting Rotarians have just entered the room.
Morning, Eric.
I want to let you know that we have
Right up front, Jessica, we got a spot for you because I've got something for you anyway. I have money for you. Yeah.
We have to have another spot for Catherine.
I want to let everybody know that we have on the 1st, 3rd, 4th, and if there is a 5th Monday, we always have a game day, and it's from 1 to 3 in the afternoon. And please let significant others and spouses know, if you are not unavailable at that time, that we have an instructor right now that's there teaching Mahjong. She is the most patient woman on earth, I can tell you, because it's not a particularly easy game to get started on. But she's very patient, and there's a whole group of us that are new. So it's a great time to learn. And we are also looking for bridge players. So if spouses or you are free between 1 and 3 on those Mondays, please come join us. It's at Willow Creek Clubhouse number 1. And it's a lot of fun. So we've had a good group lately.
Great. Thank you, Mary Alice. Appreciate that. Jay, could you talk to us about the lion dance? Our other visiting Rotarian. Jay, go ahead and stand up and let's hear about the lion dance.
All right, I was just kind of waiting for the other side to settle down a little bit here. All right, so our tradition continues here for this year for the Lunar New Year or the Chinese New Year lion dance performance at a volcano. So this time it will be February the 17th. That's the second day, I think, of the Lunar New Year, the year of the dog. So the performance is going to start at around 7 o'clock, a little bit after 7 o'clock. So we have 2 seatings, and I think most people will come at 5:30. So after the meal, and then there's a light performance, and there's a flow later at another arrangement at 7:30. So I think most of the people or the Rotarians already responded for a 5:30, but performance at 7 o'clock. If you just happen to be in the area, don't really need to come to eat or anything, just kind of enjoy the performance. And the performance again starts around the 7:15ish.
Great, thanks, Jay. So for anybody who hasn't been to the lion dance performances at the volcano for the New Year, it's pretty fun. They literally have the long paper dragon costumes with multiple dancers underneath, and they bounce around. It's neat. I've done it a couple of years, so that's a good way to enjoy a cultural event and also eat some very good food at Jay's restaurant. John McCarty, we're moving along quickly, so if you want to do a quick EWB update, we'll do it.
I attended the Engineers Without Borders meeting on Tuesday of this week with John, and the outcome is that Engineers Without Borders is hiring the company that I showed you in my slideshow, Bushproof, to go down to our village, Annisbury, and they're going to replace the broken pumps with 2 new pumps, the India Mark IIIs. Engineers Without Borders is expecting that to cost $4,000 to $5,000 with the travel and the materials and the time. Before we invest in more wells, we want to make sure that those will work for a while and that the groundwater table will support those 2 plus others. So it's important, in my mind, for them to get those replaced as quickly as possible. With the rainy season, we don't know how quickly Bushproof will get out there, but I'll keep the club informed as they get those pumps replaced, and then we'll continue with our project a few months later to make sure that as I said, that the wells, that the groundwater table can support additional wells.
Great, thanks, John. This actually works out really well for us because Engineers Without Borders spent their money on these first 2 initial wells, and they've had problems. So we're letting them use their money to be the guinea pig. We'll get everything worked out, and then we come in with our grant money in order to build additional wells after we get it all figured out, what's right and what's wrong. So, John, thanks for that. Much appreciated. Does anybody have any announcements that I don't have on the agenda? No. Travel gifts. Mr. Shattuck.
This past weekend we went up to Estes Park. It was cold. Wind was blowing between 40 and...
How cold was it?
This last weekend, my wife and I went up to Estes Park, and it was cold. Wind was blowing 40 to 60 miles an hour with the temperature in the 20s. Went into an outfitting store and found this hat made by Columbia that has a special lining on the inside that will reflect the heat back onto the individual instead of going out the top of the head. So that's the travel gift.
Great, Don. How did your brass monkey do on the trip? Blank look. You didn't even get that. Brass monkey. What happens to brass monkeys in the cold? All right. Well, maybe you're too young because that's an old one. Mr. Hope, if there's no other travel gifts, Happy Bucks.
Thank you, Mr. Oakford.
You're welcome. I guess I get to do 2 weeks in a row. I have a happy dollar for the Opioid Committee and the speakers on Saturday. It was very informative, and I appreciate everybody's participation in that. Sandra gave me $1, and she said she was happy because she's sitting between Eric and me. Jay, you got the IOUs? Oh, go ahead. Diane's ready to go.
I'm ready to go. Three happy bucks for my clients who have 9 children, and she just gave birth to triplets. So, woo, baby, woo! It's always fun to help families that way, but not that way. And another happy buck is for the opioid event. That was really glad to hear. I wasn't able to attend. And lastly, thank you, guests, for joining us. This is one of the best clubs. We have a lot of fun, and we're glad you took time out of your day to join us. So thank you.
You can pass it over to...
Here we go.
So I have 5. One, because there's nothing like being greeted at Rotary when you're completely late and made to feel welcome. 2, for a wonderful weekend away in Steamboat. Finally, there's snow. I've skied powder for the first time this season, so that felt good. 3, because my awesome fiance not only kept up but had blessed us with awesome wipeouts, so thanks for that. 4, because I really appreciate what we're doing with the opioid crisis. It is something that takes a community, so I think thank you for everyone who's taken the lead on that. And 5, I'm hoping I'm not stealing Eric's thunder, but a couple years ago for their reunion, he asked Sammy Hagar as a joke to come and play at the reunion. And, of course, his agent said no. Well, last night, if you look on his Facebook, he literally got a signed letter back from Sammy Hagar saying thanks. And so it was kind of a fun little moment for those of you who love and know Sammy Hagar. But so, very cool.
Thank you. Annie, you got some money?
What? Oh, I just gave you it.
Oh, okay.
Before Catherine spoke.
Somebody like
Yeah, I just put in $1 because John and I went up to A Basin and he skied and I sat because my knee was feeling tweaked. But we had a good birthday weekend.
Vern, you got any money? Okay, Eric.
Eric's got money.
I got 3 this morning. Did I get 2 back? Yeah. Need pocket change.
Here, Catherine. Here's your change.
Yeah, exactly. Well, she is the family CFO, or the soon-to-be family CFO. So anyway, the first one is for the first time I was able to get my company, Sierra Nevada Corporation, to sponsor a corporate table for State of Our City luncheon this year. So I'm hoping that will be a continuing trend in the future, and then we'll be able actually to give a little bit more. This year was a little short notice as far as the sponsorship funding went. But the second thing is happy to announce that after 2 years of back and forth trips to Nigeria and months and months of negotiation, the Republic of Nigerian government signed a $500 million contract to buy military warplanes from us. And so we'll be going over again probably in a few weeks for the signing ceremony and all that. And then the last one is I'll be attending the Singapore Air Show next week. And I reached out to the Rotary Club of Singapore yesterday and got an invitation back to join them for their weekly meeting next week, actually on my birthday. So I'll be exchanging our banners next week. So if anybody's got some input, let me know. That's it.
Awesome.
Very good. For Highlands Ranch Rotarians, it's a minimum of $20. We have the IOUs. All right, I'll let you think about it for a minute. Big John, any money today? Flexer.
I have
$5.
I have 5. I've had several surgeries, like in the last 20 years, probably had a lot of opioids, and discovered that I don't like opioids. But I also discovered from the symposium on Saturday that Not everybody reacts that way to opioids, so I'm grateful that I'm one that doesn't like them, but I'm also grateful for Dr. Valak and all the work that he is doing to help identify how to strategize solutions to the problem of opioids. So thank you, Dr. Valak.
Karen.
I've got 3. One is for all of our guests. Thank you very much for joining us today. Number 2 is, of course, 19 days till Daytona 500. You knew it was coming. And the third one is that my driver, Martin Truex Jr., is going to be doing an appearance next Monday, and so I'm really excited to see him at the showroom. So if anybody wants to go, 3 to 5 at the showroom.
Of course it is.
I have $1, and that's for the Opioid Committee and all the people that showed up to help on Saturday. And special shout out to Samantha Samurai Johnson, because this would not have happened without her efforts.
Thanks, Tim. Doug.
I have $1 because I think I have absolutely, totally, finally sold one of the houses in Tulsa, Oklahoma that I've had for sale for the last month.
Miss Medina. You're grumpy? You got money there. Oh, jeez. Jeez. Okay. All right. We'll move over here. Mary Alice.
My happy buck is for Ron. Thank you for joining us today, and the other guests are here.
I got this. Ron, would you stand up and show everybody your socks? Those are just fantastic. Stand up. Look at this. Look at these guys' socks. Look at these things. Stand up. Show them off. What do you think? Huh? All right. Do you have $1 for that?
Mary will get it.
Oh. All right. What do we got over here? All right, Jay.
Socks.
I know. All right.
I knew I could get it covered.
All right. Patrick.
He just obeyed.
All right. You don't need a microphone.
He's taking the left when you're taking the right.
Yeah.
Any money over here? Okay. All right. What do we got?
Don't forget those guys in the back.
Jessica. I'm getting over there. She's smiling. Throwing $1 for Jessica. Mr. Estes Park. Here you are. You got 2?
Yeah, a year ago, we announced that we had gotten a new member of our family, a little Aussie Shepherd, mini Aussie. Put her in obedience school, and I am amazed at how much I have learned.
Can we put Phil into obedience school?
And this weekend, kind of got reminded as to how good our country is. Our waitress, one of our waitresses this weekend, is here on a work program sponsored by the Ukraine government, and how they send students over here to work in the United States and find out about us.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. What do we got back? Bruce. You don't have any money? Here you go. I got a pen and everything. All right. I'll talk to Cheryl. She's no closings this week. Okay. All right. All right. Sheriff.
So I've got 2, one for all of our guests that are in the room, and ultimately, although our guest, our special guest today, Dr. Rob Valak, you'll really enjoy what he has to say, and it'll be eye-opening for everybody in the room. So, Rob, thanks for being here.
Samantha Rope.
I have 5 because I have a little bit of a story. So prepare yourselves.
We do have speakers here.
2 weeks ago, I went to the doctor for for the flu, and while I was there, he told me that he thought I might have stomach cancer. So as you can imagine, for 2 weeks of waiting, a lot goes through your mind. I'm a planner, so I had it all figured out with long-term disability and all the different pieces. Fortunately, it came back negative, but as I was thinking about all that I would do and everything else, I thought, I can still go to Rotary. I can still do all that stuff, but I get to get out of work for a few months, and, who knows what can come out of that. I also thought about what Rob had said at previous engagements about not using opioids and using the ibuprofen and acetaminophen. So I was all set to not become addicted to opioids during this process and really saw this as an opportunity. But it did make me very thankful for everyone here, because it is something that if I were to have long-term disability, I'd still come. So that says a lot.
Your plans.
She's handing you the mic.
Oh, sorry. And one more thing. Since I'm unable to get long-term disability, at the end of this month, I'll be in Minneapolis for our annual meeting. And our incoming president of the organization is a Rotarian, and we are inviting the district governor to come and meet with Rotarians that are members of our organization. So anyway, so if that all comes around.
All right, working on ex-president here.
Sorry for chatting while you're talking.
Pretty rude, two lawyers talking.
I have three. First one is, you'll remember that my son Eric did a pet collection supply thing for homeless dogs. That has promptly resulted us adopting a new dog.
Well, hey. Kid's pretty smart, isn't he?
That backfired. It backfired awfully quickly, but he's a cute little dog. So, the second one is welcome to our guests. Thanks all for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Valak. Your talk at the Opioid Symposium was fantastic and eye-opening. And third is, it's great to be here on Tuesday.
Mr. Butler. Somebody, last week, Brad put $1. I gave Brad back $1. Tripp took the $1. So you still owe Brad $1. At least, maybe $2 by now.
Then Brad, you probably could.
Kevin, you happy today? No, he's not. Okay. All right. Gotta say, all right. Samantha.
Well, I have $1. One is, it's for everyone that's on the opioid committee. Thank you so much. I was able to assign tasks to everyone and have faith that everything would turn out while I was at Rotary Leadership Institute that day. So I didn't get any calls negative or positive, so I assumed it all went smoothly. But this cause is very dear to my heart. Most of you probably don't know why. I have a long backstory to it. So anytime we can move forward in solutions for pain management and opioid addiction, it's something I'm really grateful for.
Thanks, Samantha. Phil.
I just have $1 for thanking everyone in this club for everything that you do.
Roxy Hahn.
Thank you, Phil, for that positive comment.
You act surprised.
I was right here beside him when it happened.
I told Phil to be brief because we have some very important speakers.
I'm being brief.
Okay,
I have
thank you.
three. I have three. Number one is I'm happy for the success of the opioid information meeting.
Thank you.
Number two is my second near-death experience in a while. I was on the highway and wheel fell off a car, and I hit the wheel.
Ooh.
So fortunately, I barely hit the wheel. So anyway, I'm hoping my tire can be repaired today, and I'm grateful that's all that happened was the tire. And three is my daughter passed her PHR exam and is now a professional HR person.
All right. You can hold that. Jay, you got any money?
Yeah, I got it too. One is welcome all guests, and now you know that why this club is so wonderful, and you'll have fun. Hopefully, see a lot of you coming back. And second is a happy buck that next Monday night, that's for the 5th year that I'm hosting a recognition dinner for 45 high school students. They are the steering committee members that organize the diversity conference at Cherry Creek High School. This year's the 25th conference. So being part of the diverse community here and contribute to the cause and help the young kids grow is something we're very proud of.
Andre's got some money out there.
I do have 5 happy bucks. The first one is for all our guests. Thank you for being with us. It's nice to see you all. The second one is for our speaker. Thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us. And an apology, I may have to leave early before you finish. The third one is love Colorado, love skiing, hate the traffic though. This year has been the worst. 3.5 hours this past weekend getting in and out of Copper Mountain. Yeah, we need Randy to solve it, so we need a speed train or something. Anyway, the fourth one is basketball season, so go Blue Devils. And I'm looking forward. I'm taking Andres, my son, to the Duke campus at the end of February, and hoping we can see one of the in-conference games, Duke versus Syracuse. So, absolutely, he's going to be all dressed in blue and painted blue. He's going to be jumping with the Cameron Crazies. and lastly, it's Tuesday. It's great to be back.
Why don't you hand that mic to Greg? I think he's going to open up his wallet today.
My wallet it's rusted shut.
I know. We can't pry it open. Boy, I'll tell you what. I got Mr. Pie. You owe some money. I don't know what to say about that, Greg. Everybody knows you. I try my best, but Mr. Pie.
Just a quick dollar. I've missed a few meetings. It looks like Tuesday mornings have become the new mornings that everybody wants to have a meeting now, because Wednesday's full, Friday's full, Monday's full. So it's Tuesday and Thursdays that they now want to meet. So, but I'm trying my best to avoid them. Sorry. And I'm continuing to work on your transportation issue. I'm on 2 committees, but that doesn't seem to help.
And they meet on Tuesdays, so.
I need an IOU.
Tell me and all.
Great. All right. I'm going to do 5. First, for all our guests, thank you so much for coming. Ron, sorry that I forgot you as we got going. Those are powerful socks. I must say I'm quite impressed. Secondly, for everybody on the Opioid Commission, the project is going far better than we had hoped. Sheriff Dave and I sat down for coffee yesterday and talked about some other ideas that I want to bring back to the committee for going forward. He's excited. I'm excited. I think there's an awful lot that we can do. Our visiting Rotarians, thank you. Hopefully you don't steal too many of our ideas. It's okay if you still steal Phil, but you can't steal any of our ideas.
Knight said a nice thing about you, Jay. That's the last time.
All right. And then to our speaker, who you're going to meet here in just a second, got just a ton of information. So with that, Sheriff Dave, would you like to introduce our... I'll fill it out and turn it in. I filled it out. Yeah. Go lay by your dish.
I wouldn't trust him.
Good morning. We're going to make this very quick as far as an introduction to Dr. Valak. I'm sure he's one busy guy, but let me just say this. At HEP, 111 pounds of drugs and 46 pounds of sharps and things like that. For an hour and a half, that's phenomenal. I'm telling you. In our drug take-back box at the sheriff's office, that 111 pounds is about what we collect in 2 months, and that's more than the drug take-back day we had over at Centennial Medical. It's not as big as Kaiser or the Smoky Hill Library, but 111 pounds is phenomenal, so that's great. So there's a consortium about opioid abuse, the epidemic, and I started working with that group 4 or 5 years ago, I think, and I really don't attend the meetings, although we're heavily invested in this. And Dr. Valak may say something about this is all about safe prescribing or good prescribing, safe storage, and drug take-back. And what we did on Saturday was drug take-back, and it was great. So my introduction to Rob, and I'm not going to read his resume, it's exceptional, but what I will say, he knows more about the opioid epidemic and opioids than anyone in the state of Colorado, and probably broader than that. But listen to him, it's great information. So Rob, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. And thanks very much to everybody for the opportunity to come and share with you about this important topic. Everybody knows this is sort of front of mind now. You can't pick up the paper. You watch virtually any newscast now has something on this topic, and there's a reason for it. Because it's become a very big deal. It's been a big deal for a while now, but I've been doing this prevention work since I started in pharmacy in 1987. We realized we had the makings of a problem in the mid to late 80s. And it's getting enough attention because enough people are dying. Unfortunately, that's usually what it takes. But basically what I want to share with you are 3 things in 3 little segments. One of them is to try, hopefully I don't think it'll be too difficult, to convince you that we have a problem. Second, to try to describe a little bit of how we got into the problem. And then third, what's being done to try to dig ourselves out of it. So it's those are the 3 little segments that I'll try to get through in 30 to 40 minutes. There's a lot of info. I tend to lean on, give you a little bit more info and make it worth your time, than show up and say, well, he didn't really say anything. That was a waste of my morning. So I lean that way. So starting off with how big is this thing? Well, it's a pretty big deal. In 2016, the last year that we have full data on, we're waiting any minute now for the 2017 data to get released, but in 2016, over 63,000 people in the United States died from drug overdoses. 1 every 10 minutes, 6 more during the hour, I count these for an hour, that will be dying during this talk. 2/3 of those involve prescription drugs, so it's much more prescription drugs than illicits. And of all the prescription drugs, opioids are the big driver of all of that. So it's the single biggest reason is prescription opioids, biggest driver of all those numbers. In Colorado in 2016, there were 912 drug overdoses, and of those, 504 were opioid related. And the number that we track in Colorado is the prescribed opioid stuff like oxycodone, OxyContin, and hydrocodone like Vicodin or Norco. Those are the most common. But anything else too, like morphine or anything that's prescribed, or things like heroin or fentanyl, the illicits, but opioids. So not meth or cocaine or anything else like that. So the licit and illicit opioid number combined is what we track most closely, and that was 504 in 2016. So a very troubling number. Even 3 years before that, it was like 166. So tripling in 3 years. So a dramatic growth. If there is any good news, and I think it's about the only line in this talk that has any good news about it, is that the prescribed opioid overdose deaths only, so if it's just a prescription drug alone, like oxycodone alone was the only substance on board, those numbers are starting to slow down and maybe even start to turn the corner coming back down, which is good news. 2 years ago, that was 329. Last year, that was 300. So about a 10% drop in those, which is encouraging. But the bad news is everything else is going up. Heroin overdose deaths have gone from 160 to 228. Fentanyl deaths from 41 to 49. People say fentanyl is not in Colorado, and I strongly disagree. There's 50 primary fentanyl overdose deaths in Colorado a year and a half ago. And that's a lot. With the rarity that people think that substance exists out in the market. We know all these are undercounted numbers because here in Arapahoe County we have a wonderful medical examiner and the numbers are probably pretty darn good here. That's not true for the rest of the state or most of the country. We've got 9 ME counties that have really good medical examiners and over 50 counties that have coroners who have part-time jobs and don't have budget to do autopsies, so we will never know in many of those counties what the real numbers are. So these are a strong underestimate of what the truth probably is. And all this, when you put them all together, the two numbers that we talk about are actually still going up about 5 to 8% a year. And we believe that growth based on supply in the market is going to continue for another 6 or 8 years before it turns back and comes down. So people say, oh, we're turning the corner, and we may be turning the corner a little bit on one substance, but not another. It's a very fluid market. And the market for heroin is growing. The market for fentanyl is growing, very robust and strong, much cheaper to get heroin or fentanyl than it is to get prescribed opioids because of all the attention we pay to it. So it's good and bad. We're driving a really wonderful market for the Sinaloan cartel. If you read Sam Quinones' book, Dreamland, I suggest you get it and read it. It's a really good book. He's an investigative journalist and used to be on Nightline and 2020 and all the ABC stuff, but wrote a book called Dreamland. I would recommend it.
What's the name of the book?
Dreamland. Yep. And yes.
I was wondering, well, what's the, we've all heard of heroin, but what gets people addicted to fentanyl and methadone? What's the draw to it?
Yeah, basically it's an increases in potency. If you go from Vicodin or hydrocodone, it's stronger to go up to oxycodone. It's stronger to go to heroin. It's another order of magnitude up to go to fentanyl. And dealers, smartly, will put a little bit of the stronger substance into whatever they're selling to you. It's basically they're trying to strengthen, giving you one really good rush, one really good high. And you say, wow, that is really good. I'm going back to that dealer. And your addiction becomes even stronger. Your receptors continue to upregulate. You're creating a stronger and stronger addict. And it's a phenomenon called chasing the dragon. Addicts will tell you this, that they're chasing the first rush that they ever had. And they know they will probably never get it again. But they're trying to get it. And the Sinaloans have figured that out and use that as marketing. It's very simple upregulation, upselling kind of thing. It's a frightening thing, too, because those increasingly potent drugs only takes a small amount to kill you. You get some of the analogs to fentanyl, carfentanil and sufentanil, that are 100 times more potent than fentanyl, and you can get contact overdose, touching your lip, you inhale a couple of just specks of that stuff and overdose and die because of the potency of it. All it takes now is grains of it instead of pounds of it. So the potency level is going up and up and up. And it's very scary. As somebody with training in pharmacology, the scary thing to me is the increases in potency.
Well, and the other, what I read is that because kind of what you spoke to, that we make it much more difficult to get prescriptions refilled, that the dealers have figured, and I actually remember this when I used to go to North Carolina, is that Raleigh-Durham it's upper middle class, it's a really nice area, but it was one of the growing communities for heroin. It's because they can't get their prescriptions refilled, and so the dealers figured it out, and so they're going into like the wealthy communities because people will pay for it, and they figured out it's cheaper than trying to go through their pharmacist to get their opioids refilled.
It's true. As we clamp down on those, it's harder, and there are some really wealthy communities that have that phenomenon for that reason. New Hampshire has one of the highest overdose rates per capita in the United States because of it. And New Hampshireites are not it's not the poorest state, and it's not like living in Mississippi or Alabama in terms of poverty. Not in New Hampshire. So this really knows no bounds. And the CDC says that. Age, gender, region, doesn't matter. How much money you make, doesn't matter where you live. People ask me all the time, is it bad in urban areas? Yes. Rural areas? Absolutely. Frontier, yes. They ask, where is it bad? Then where are you? That's the answer I give them back. Wherever you are, it's bad. And I'll show you a map in a minute to hopefully convince you of that. Right now. So look, not even a minute, a second. Back in 2002, this is what the overdose mortality map looked like in Colorado. The darker shaded areas are worse. The middle around these orange is about the national average at the time, about 12 per 100,000 per year. Lighter is below the national average. So in terms of shading, middle shading is about average. We already had a serious problem in the San Luis Valley and in Denver counties already then, and in Pueblo. And that's just gotten worse. And this is in 2002. But if you watch this thing over the intervening 12 years, and how this rate gets worse, and that's 2014. 2 years into 2016, the same thing. It's even darker. The shading just keeps going. Imagine 2 more clicks on the same graph, and it's just continued to get worse, and we think 2017 is going to continue to get worse. So virtually everywhere in the state has areas that are above the national average. In Pueblo and the San Luis Valley, where it was bad before, in the lower Arkansas Valley, there's 4 times the national average in overdose deaths per 100,000 per year. So serious, serious problem.
Why didn't
It's just been a long time. It's a combination, it's believed, of poverty, access to medical care being really difficult for people, sort of the whole thing with deaths of despair that you read about now has existed in that part of the state for 20 or 30 years. So in that intervening 12 years, that's a 5-fold increase in the rate of death. Anything else, if we increase the overdose, the death rate of a specific form of cancer or diabetes or asthma 5-fold in 10 years, everybody would be down at the Capitol demanding action, or marching on Washington, demanding action for why is this death rate going up 5-fold in a decade? That's craziness. It really is kind of crazy. The death rates come down for most things as we address them. This one is going wildly the other direction, so that's not good. Back in 1979, it was about 4 per 100,000 per year in Colorado, and it stayed that way until about 1990. And then it doubled in a decade, doubled again, tripled, from the original by another 5 years. And now this is about 15.5 in Colorado for the average. So it's a fourfold increase, almost fivefold increase in that intervening time, which is very frightening. By comparison, the motor vehicle death rate is about 9.5 per 100,000 per year. So this is about 50% worse now than motor vehicle deaths of all causes, which we know to still be an issue. In fact, we've done pretty good with driving down the motor vehicle death rate, the little dotted line, over the last 20 years. We've worked very hard with seat belts and better airbags and traffic laws and speed limits and all that to increase highway safety and automobile safety. And we've done a good job. We still need to work on it, but it's gotten better. Even firearm deaths, recent events notwithstanding, the per capita firearm death rate is going down in the United States. It's not going up. We hear about large number events like that, which are horrible and tragic. I'm not saying that they aren't. But prescription overdose deaths people die differently, one at a time, in quiet, unknown. So we don't see them, we don't hear about them. There's just an awful lot more of them than there are even those other two causes of death. Now this single-handedly has caused the second drop in the average lifespan in the United States for the first 2 years running, for the first time in over 50 years. We haven't seen this happen. It takes world wars and plagues to do more than this in terms of dropping lifespan of an entire country of 350 million people. That's how significant it is. So it's very important. And as I mentioned, the big driver really is the prescribed opioids of all the drug deaths. People talk about, well, it's meth or it's cocaine or it's whatever it was, and nothing begins to touch the prescribed opioids in terms of the numbers. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. What's really frightening is that for every one of those deaths, and it's about 33,000 prescribed opioid overdose deaths out of the 63. So for 33,000, multiply that by 10 is about how many people get treatment for substance use disorder. 32 people visit the emergency department for something related to their substance use disorder. So it was an overdose or an abscess from a wound or something that was a direct consequence of their use disorder. 130 people for every one of the 33,000 meet diagnostic criteria for a use disorder. So are medically diagnosable with a substance use disorder. And that's a lot. 33,000 times 130, we're getting into large numbers now. Multiple millions of Americans. But to me, the most frightening number of all is when you survey people, and there are surveys that happen every year, we ask people, have you taken an opioid in the last year that either wasn't yours or was something that you got before and you're taking it for a different reason now? Like you got it for your wisdom tooth, you saved it and you took it because you were feeling backache later, or whatever it is. That's all. Any of that is called non-medical use. And for every one of those 33,000 people, 825 people admit to non-medical use of an opioid in the last year. That's how many admit it. And we know that anybody, like saying, who's going to admit to bad behavior? Like who exceeded the speed limit? Where's Dave? Don't listen. Plug your ears. Plug your ears. Who exceeded the speed limit on their way over here today to the to this meeting? Okay, so 3 of us, right? And 4 of us, including Dave, right? But I know that it's more than 3. Yeah, he is. That's right. I said.
Definitely did not. Do that.
Right.
I did not do that.
And I'm gonna.
Don't do it in Rifle County.
And I will say it again. I did not do it. But those 4 of us that raised their hands, whoever those people were, the hypothetical people that raised their hands, we know that's not true. We know it's probably 3 times that. Any self-reported bad behavior is an underestimate. So we know this is probably 1,500 or 2,000 people. 2,000 times 33,000. Now we're talking, somewhere between 10 and 15% of the population are taking an opioid non-medically any given year. And that's a large pool of people that can move up this pyramid. And really, probably ought to turn this thing upside down because really it's a gradual progression downward towards use disorders, having to go to the emergency room, being diagnosed, maybe if you're lucky getting into treatment and not becoming one of the deaths, if you're very fortunate. The cost to the society is also very great. The economic estimates are that it's maybe an $80 billion a year problem. Recent estimates from the White House say this is more like $500 billion a year, if you count the cost of the lost lives and what the productivity would have been for losing people in the prime of their lives. And those estimates are probably better in terms of the total impact. $500 billion a year estimate. But the proportions are probably about right. A small amount for medical complications, really a percent or 2. $3 billion for substance use disorder treatment. 4 times that for criminal justice. And as Dave will tell you, that's where a lot of this stuff happens is in the criminal justice system, that people with addictions get treated. I wouldn't treated is not the proper word. Get handled or dealt with, and it's inhumane. I mean, and people will tell you that. Law enforcement, jails, anybody will tell you, we're not qualified for this. We're not treatment professionals. We don't want to be treatment professionals. We got to figure something out. But that's where we handle it, is in jails and prisons. And we force people to detox. And it's miserable. It's a miserable thing. You wouldn't put anyone through it, no matter what you thought of them. Your worst, you would not put anyone through it by choice to do that. It's miserable. But the biggest, almost 80% of this is lost productivity. The effect it has on all of us when people have use disorders. It affects families. People go through a lot to try to help care for somebody, even in the best of circumstances, to care for them, missing work, not being able to do as much. That person who has the use disorder cannot work as effectively even if they have a job. It's very, very difficult, and we all bear the cost of that as a society. Another alarming stat is that we have a 90% treatment gap. Everybody who needs treatment, of all the people that do, and we estimate this to be, very high, 21 million. This could be as high as 30 million Americans right now need substance use disorder treatment. We're able to treat about 10% of them, about 3 million a year in our current treatment systems. Woefully inadequate for people who need treatment, simply cannot get it. If you walk into a room with a suitcase full of money, you may not be able to get it. So it almost doesn't matter. It's even difficult if you have all the means in the world. And if you don't, you've got virtually no shot. You got 9.5 out of 10 to get nothing at all. So that's a huge issue for us as we do it. If this was true again for cancer, as I mentioned earlier, if you walked in and said someone was diagnosed with cancer, sorry, only 1 out of 10 can we give chemo. Or only 1 out of 10 get the surgery. Sorry. That's the way it is. Again, you couldn't get to the Capitol because of the line of cars that would be parked. You think traffic's bad now. Then the line of cars that would be all the way to the Capitol say, that can't stand. There's no way we can have people not getting access to this. But this is a disease. The science is clear. Addiction is a chronic relapsing remitting brain disease. First use is a choice. Addiction is no longer a choice. Dopamine is in control. Someone with a use disorder absolutely cannot choose away. It's impossible. Ask a heroin addict and it's impossible to just choose away. So the whole moral failing thing, the whole choice thing is just wrong. The narrative is wrong and the science is clear. First use is a bad choice. Addiction, we've got to treat as a medical condition. The National Institute on Drug Abuse, at the FDA, the SAMHSA, everybody agrees. The medical and scientific community agrees. This is a disease, and we've got to treat it like a disease, just like we do any other. But we have few docs who are able to do this. In Colorado, we've only got about 300 doctors who are capable of treating this on an outpatient basis. That's not enough, if you can imagine. It's just not enough. And of those 300, 100 of them aren't taking patients anymore. Another 100 of them don't take Medicaid. We've got 100 doctors that can treat a population of 5.5 million and tens of thousands of people who need treatment right now, and probably tens of thousands of more very soon, based on the pathways people are on. We simply have nowhere near the capacity we need to try to address this. So, not to be the little black rain cloud, but that's supposed to convince you that we're kind of in a world of hurt, which I think we are. And it's meant to be kind of a stark picture to hopefully, give people a stark realization. You can talk to your friends about this when you go home or your family members and say, look, this is a bigger deal than I thought. Yes, I see it in the paper, but this is a really, really big deal that we have to talk about, have to figure out. So how do we get in this mess? I think it's a story of 3 words. Follow the opioids. Where they go, so go the bad things. We've got, in the last 20 years, not quite 20, we've had an increase in the use of opioids per capita in the United States of 4 times. We've quadrupled the amount that we give out per capita in that period of time. We've really ramped it up. Said, oh, this is how we're going to treat pain. And that's how we do it in this country. We consume 80% of the world's opioids, all of them. We consume 98% of the world's oxycodone. OxyContin is not used anywhere in the world except here. And either we know something the rest of the world doesn't, or something else. And I'm just going to say what I think. That's what I think. It's to the point where 3 years ago, there were 260 million prescriptions given out at retail for an opioid. It's enough for every American adult to have a bottle of these every year. 2 bottles in every medicine cabinet every year. That's a lot of pills. Based on the average number per prescription, it's more than 10 billion tablets going out a year in the United States. People want to know where the real dealers are. I say, look around. Look to your left, look to your right. We are the dealers. Look in your medicine cabinet, and I would bet at any given table of 8 people, 4 of you have leftover opioids in the medicine cabinet. Probably more. I'll bet right now that it's 4. Put down everything I got. I'll put my credit card down. And I'll win every table. Not a betting man, but I will follow you home. We will look through your medicine cabinet, and we will see, and I will win. And that's what's scary, is we've got to get the stuff out of the medicine. That's where the supply really is for the non-medical use. And that's what's really scary, is we have this incredible supply. We have a lot of people that say they're non-medically using opioids. Yes?
Has this information gotten to the docs? Because I've had several surgeries on my knee, and I refuse to fill those, but they automatically give you a prescription of this type.
Yep. No, it's a huge part of this, and we'll talk a little bit about it as we move through the rest of this. But provider education, we've gotten to the point where both doctors, patients also expect it. Everybody believes pain equals opioid, and that's where we are. It's the wrong place to be. It's like, how do we wake up here? 20 years ago, it's like, you fall asleep on the train, then you wake up, what do you mean I'm in Cleveland? I'm trying to go to LA. Why? That's what kind of happened. How did we end up here? And it's because doctors are partially responsible, pharmaceutical companies, patients for expecting that everything can go away, pain killing is possible. It's not. Only thing that kills pain is removal of the source. There is no pharmacology that can remove pain. We can treat it a little bit. Opioids, you'll take you from a 9 to a 6 on a 1 to 10 scale. That's it. So people get to a 6 and they think, if I double the dose, I'll get to a 3. Wrong. You'll stay at 6 and you'll become addicted. Doesn't work that way. There's no improved pain control. None. You plateaued out, ought to be doing cartwheels that you got to 6. And people don't know that. Doctors don't know that. So we're working to try to train them better and to train people better that this is not what you have to have, that there's alternatives to that. But it's a very, very good point. And that's what doctors they've become trained. And the culture of medicine is pain equals opioid. If I cut on you, if I do a surgery, I'm harming you, therefore I'm going to give you something to handle that pain, even though that's starting another fire. You're trying to put out, they're trying to put out fires with gasoline, and it's not working. And as those things happen, more opioids, so go the treatment admissions and the overdose deaths, everything that you see with it, all the bad stuff follows along. Wherever the higher concentrations of opioids go in the country, right up along with it are the treatment admissions and the overdose deaths. It's guaranteed. Wherever the opioids go, bad stuff follows. We also do know, and I'm not capable of putting a graphic together like you've seen my black and white slides already, so the idea, I stole this from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, but we do know it's a complicated thing. It's not just the drug. There are lots of other things that are at play as well, of course. Genetics and biology are a big factor. The environment is a big factor. Predisposing things like what they call risk and protective factors. If you come from a very strong environment that has better social support, and a better family structure, and safe housing, and and employment and all that, you have lower likelihood, but no guarantees, because again, it crosses across all backgrounds and all race and socioeconomic strata. And really, what drove this huge increase in opioids, this 4-fold increase over the years? Back when I was in school, we were focusing on undertreatment of pain. We were called barbarians. I was called an opiophobe. We were opiophobic. It was a word. I'm making up words all the time. I didn't make that one up. But someone said, you are opiophobic. I said, yeah, I'm crappy drugophobic. I just think there's other stuff that works better. I'd take the ibuprofen and the acetaminophen, rotated every 4 hours, and I can get you 50 to 55% pain relief. And the opioid will give you 30 to 35% with the risk of addiction. And if I lay that in front of you as a choice, which one do you want? The 50 to 55% and very minimal side effects? Or do you want the 30 to 35% and the risk of addiction and nausea and vomiting and all that kind of stuff? And you choose. And I think if patients were explained that way, I think if people were taught, and we're starting to teach docs that now, but if you explain that to people and they say, why do I want that then? I don't want that thing. But we've gotten to the point where I expect the good stuff and people think the good stuff is opioids. Doctors write what they perceive to be the good stuff, and they were poorly trained and they were poorly marketed to. We also had pain as the 5th vital sign. You may have heard that trend. That was something put together not by the medical industry, medical professionals, but by the pharmaceutical industry. They created a laundering organization, a wonderful money laundering organization called the American Pain Society, dumped tens of millions of dollars into it, and started promotional campaigns about pain being the 5th vital sign. You should ask everybody about their pain all the time, like a vital sign. If you take their blood pressure, you should be asking about their pain. And not that you shouldn't pay attention to people's pain. I'm all for it. But it's not a vital sign. Like meaning if you have some pain, you're going to die. Like if you don't have blood pressure, you're dead. You don't have heart rate, you're dead. That's why they call it vital. Seriously, but if you have some pain, doesn't mean you're dead. We want to treat it, we want to handle it, but it does not belong at the level of a vital sign. It belongs at the other signs and symptoms of your ability to function and do what you need to do to live your life. That's very important. But it's not a vital sign, and the pharmaceutical industry was wonderful in, believe it or not, the pharmaceutical industry is really good at selling things. Just letting you know, it's cluing you in. So drug company advertising and promotion. You know, the Elliot Sadler, if you read pieces in the New Yorker about this guy, that's the principal owner at Purdue Pharma, the makers of OxyContin, first marketed Valium in the 1950s, Librium in the 1960s, and won awards for marketing and on the business side of the world for marketing OxyContin in the 1990s. And using peer-to-peer marketing, hiring doctors to go influence other doctors, and use networks of peers to do this. And it's a really well-studied marketing phenomenon that docs learn this way. Now we don't do it because we don't let docs take all that money. We have sunshine laws to say you can't take $500,000 a year to tell your friends about it and get kickbacks and all that kind of stuff called whatever you want to call them. Call them speakers bureaus. I call big kickback schemes. But you know, this is why we've driven this. And the companies are very, very good at it. Docs aren't very well trained. You would think docs would be really well trained in pharmacology. Not so. You think they'd be really well trained in how to differentiate different kinds of pain. Not so. You would think they'd know something about the signs and symptoms of addiction or how to treat it. Absolutely not. And you talk to any self-respecting doc, and I know hundreds of them as friends, and they'll tell you this, like, no, I didn't get any of that in med school. I got a 3-credit course in pharmacology, and there's 70,000 drugs in the armamentarium. And I got 45 contact hours. I learn on the fly. Doctors learn pharmacology by doing, which is kind of like learning how to fly a plane by getting in it and just starting flying the plane. That's what I would say. Like I always ask the doc, you know, where's your pharmacology training? None. Well, then I'm going to tell you what you're going to write for me and what you're not going to write for me, because I'm a pharmacologist by training. But docs don't know that stuff as well as you think they do. Talk to your pharmacist. I always say, ask the pharmacist what they would take. Look in my medicine cabinet. You'll see the Advil liquid gels, Tylenol rapid release gels, a couple of component pieces of some cough and cold meds. That's it. No controlled substances whatsoever. Well, you don't have any of the good stuff. I said, yeah, I do. I got the, I'm not stupid. Right, exactly. I'm not stupid. I know the good stuff. I know the good versus bad. Look in the medicine cabinet of a pharmacist. And again, docs fight tooth and nail to not give prescriptive authority over to pharmacists, because it takes power and authority away from docs. They want to be the ones driving the bus. It's ironic because they'll say, I'm going to send you to the radiologist to read your film or your MRI. I can't read that MRI. Or I'm going to send you to the endocrinologist for this or the neurologist for that if you're having a seizure. I'm sending you to the neurologist. I don't know about that. But they have no trouble prescribing 70,000 medications. None at all, with no training. I would be freaking out if I was a doctor. Oh, give me the pharmacologist. Where are they? And the younger doctors will tell you that. Pharmacist is over here. You talk to them about that. Like, I don't want to, I'm not going over there. You figure it out, which is what it should be. I want the best trained person, like a plumber to do my plumbing. I'm not plumbing my house. I'm not doing my own electrical work. I'm not doing that. I'm blow up the house. The drugs are very powerful and highly addictive. People have no idea just how quickly. First dose, your body starts to change on the first dose. Your receptors start to change. Your body will produce more. In about 3 weeks, you will start to notice signs of withdrawal. If you take an opioid for 3 weeks, you'll start to notice. People will take this for hip replacements, whatever, for 15 to 22 days is the average. And after that, people say, man, when I stopped taking that, I felt like I had the flu. A fever and chills. I just didn't feel right. I think I might have come down with the flu. And I said, no, you came down with junior varsity withdrawal from opioids is what you came down with. And that's exactly what's happening to you. People just don't know that. Doctors don't tell people that. And we need to know that. That's got to get out. That's what is happening. And then there's also a very robust black market for opioids. One 20-milligram OxyContin tablet will fetch $20 to $50 on the street, between $1 and $3 per milligram on the street. So it's extremely lucrative. If I can get you to write me a 100-tablet prescription, it's $2,000. If I can do 5 of those a day by bouncing around, just drive up and down Arapahoe Road, and tomorrow I'll go down Parker, and the next day I'll go up and down Broadway, and I'll just do that 5 days a week, I can make a nice living, $200,000, $300,000 a year doing that, just doctor shopping. So how does this problem most often start? Yes,
Quick question. How much of that problem of the doctors being willing to prescribe a lot of medication come also from our legal system, in where doctors are trying to do a CYA all the time, and they would rather prescribe you 10 medications as opposed to having you sue me because I didn't give you anything for your pain?
Yep, that's a very difficult thing, and we think that tort reform and that kind of thing is part of the answer, because docs do. They practice a lot of CYA medicine. They order tests that they probably don't need to order most of the time. They need some tests, but a large fraction of testing is ass covering. So they did what they could, even though the predictive ability of most of that testing is limited at best. And when I say, if you're not going to get any more information to change the course of my treatment, don't do the test. I don't want to get poked. I don't want to give you more blood. I don't want to lie in a tube if it's not going to help you make a better decision for me. But docs will do that. So that's part of this. It's one of those many factors driving it. I might throw that on that slide. So thank you. The perfect storm slide, that belongs on there. So most often, how does this start? In Colorado, believe it or not, we're not among the highest states in terms of the amount of opioids per capita we give out. We give it out about 6.3 in terms of the sales of opioids per. This is kilograms per 100,000 people. Number 37 in the U.S. in terms of the amount that we push out. So we're a little bit below average. And we're right in the lowest kind of quartile range. There's 10, 12 states below us. That's about where we are right now. We've done a good job trying to ratchet this down a bit. But troublingly, we're number 2 in the United States in our willingness to try that stuff non-medically. It's that non-medical use thing. In Colorado, if you factor in marijuana, alcohol, cocaine, all the drugs combined, we're number 1. Go Colorado, number 1. In our willingness to try stuff non-medically. So we have a very low risk aversion, a very high willingness to experiment, and even with a moderate supply, that's all you need. We're going to have the lowest absolute 50th ranked supply to really cut that off, because we have the highest willingness to try those things. So every tablet in your medicine cabinet is a target. Someone is looking for it and willing to use it. So be aware of that. Your friends, your neighbors, your kids, your plumber, the realtor, people coming to the open house, everybody is looking in your medicine cabinet for the opioids. Everybody is looking. And your kids know where they are, believe me, because they know the street value at school. So if you don't think, or your grandkids, they know the value of this stuff. And when people start, you look at people who have a negative consequence, go into treatment, overdose and survive, get diagnosed with a use disorder. Where did they start? 70% of them will tell you they got it from the medicine cabinet of a family member or friend. That's where they started. 70%. So it's the single most important thing we can do. So we call them vectors of transmission in medical terms. The single most important vector is shut off the medicine cabinet thing. Get the stuff out of your medicine cabinet. That's why take-back is so important. It's why Dave Walcher has a take-back box in his office, and he sets his coffee mug on it in the morning. That the take-back box is that important, and Dave gets that, and that's why we had a take-back event with the symposium on Saturday and collected 110 pounds of meds in a very small event. And it tells you the drop in the bucket that is. There's almost 5 billion total prescriptions dispensed at retail in the United States every year. 5 billion. That's not just the opioids, it's everything. But opioids are 11% of those. So it's a lot of medications in the medicine cabinet. You take 110 pounds back, and I would argue that should be thousands of pounds. At least hundreds of pounds. Then the next most common is people who have that stuff left over and do the non-medical use thing. So they got this legitimately, most often for a soft tissue kind of thing, like a sports injury, strain, that kind of thing, or from a third molar extraction. Very common first exposure is wisdom tooth. But have those 30 tablets or 60 tablets or whatever ridiculous amount of meds that were given to you, leave them in the medicine cabinet, and then later on say, my back hurts, whatever, or I just don't feel good. Or hell, I'm just going to try one of these non-medically, or whatever reason. And that's the next 17% of people. So 87% we could cut off if we just cut the supply down of that stuff for the starting. We want to stop the fires before they start is the most important thing in terms of prevention. We've got to treat people that have use disorders and are in a bad way, but we've got to also prevent the problem from going and continuing. So what's being done about it? There's a lot going on at all levels. We're trying to address this from the supply chain at manufacturers all the way down into the medical system, which is sort of this purple bubble here. There are still pill mills that you see. They're rare, but there still is the occasional one. Last year in Colorado, the Attorney General's office prosecuted one of them, the year before 2 of them. So they're occasional. They don't seem like a lot, but if you give out 3 or 4 million tablets in a year, it can really disrupt a community pretty quickly. One of them was in Summit County, one of them was in Salida, one was in Lakewood, one was in Parker. So they're wherever. There still are those. There's problematic prescribing, and we know about that. The docs write too many of these drugs, they write for too many tablets. And we're all over them trying to do this. One of the laws that we're considering in the legislature right now that I'll mention would be limiting what doctors can do on the very first prescription. So they can't give out the wacky numbers of tablets on the first prescription, because that's known to be an issue, as you found out, and so many people do. Emergency departments are really working hard. Pharmacies, even payers is one of the few places where I'd say I welcome payers making it a little harder to get opioids and a little easier to get other stuff. That would be great. Unfortunately, the opioids are cheap and the alternatives are expensive, except for over-the-counter stuff, and no one wants to be told you can treat that with an over-the-counter med. Sounds like I'm copping out, and I'm not going to give you something very good if I tell you it's over-the-counter, because we know the over-the-counter meds don't work, right? They're all terrible. Man, I am telling you, Advil liquid gels, Tylenol rapid release gels, I am not on retainer from those people, but I'm telling you it's the way to go. So the President's Commission, you may have heard about this last year. There were actually some very good people on that commission. When a colleague of mine at Harvard was on that, and she's super smart and very well informed, and advised the President on what to do. And so far, he's declared a national public health emergency, but that's about it. Renewed that last week. It expired, renewed it. Okay, but has done none of the other things that the commission recommended in terms of treatment expansion, mandatory CME for doctors to learn more about this, equipping more people with naloxone, having better prescription drug monitoring programs, which are tracking databases that doctors and pharmacists can look into to see what prescriptions you've gotten. So I can look up and say, oh, Joe, gee, I see you've gone to 15 doctors and 12 pharmacies in the last week. Maybe we ought to have a conversation. And whether that's calling Dave or calling your doctor about this problem, either way, we should have a conversation when that's happening, because that's not a normal behavior. So there's ways to detect that, but doctors don't often use this stuff. Pharmacies check that about 90% of the time. Doctors check it about 20% of the time, because they're super busy, and I understand it. It's disruptive to the workflow, but there's ways to do this. The CDC has said, all right, this is a national epidemic, and declared it one. So that's the first thing they can do. They declare epidemics, they track them, and they say, hey, here's what we should be focusing on. That's one job of CDC. They also did something that's very atypical for them. They told last year, they said, well, a year and a half ago now, they said, here's guidelines for doctors on how to prescribe opioids for chronic pain. What are the infectious disease people, the Zika people, whatever, the hepatitis tracking people, telling me how to prescribe opioids for pain for? So doctors don't like, if you haven't listened, doctors don't like being told, here's how you will do this. I'm going to give you a list, you'll follow this checklist, and you're going to do it that way. That doesn't typically go over well. But that's kind of what's happened. The CDC is trying to, and at the very least, it has started a conversation in the medical community about, all right, if we don't agree with that, what should we do? And so the doctors are now finally engaged and strongly saying, debating, what do we need to do, what do we not need to do, how do we improve this thing? So I think with the medical community, I've seen engagement like I have not seen before based on that. CMS says in some way for Medicare patients they're going to adopt these guidelines. Whether they're incentivizing doctors to follow them or penalizing them if they don't, they haven't said yet. But they're the largest payer in the world, is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Single largest payer in the world. So they have the ability to move the needle on things if they choose to change payment for something. They have that ability, and so they're looking at how to do that. The FDA put a black box warning on all opioids of any strength, any form, whatever. In the black box, which is at the top of the label, it says if you take this drug long enough, in a dosage strong enough, you will get opioid-induced respiratory depression, you'll get addicted, and you'll die. Consider yourselves warned. And that's directed at doctors, basically. The black box is, the doctor is called the learned intermediary and has the responsibility to know what's in it, the black box, and to be able to tell the patients and communicate the benefits and risks to patients. And if they're not doing that to you, then that's malpractice. Straight, plain and simple. There's more and more lawsuits being brought against pharmacies and doctors and all that for, hey, I wasn't informed on the risks of these things. You know the risk benefit. You didn't tell me the risks along with those benefits, and you should have told me. So that's important. The DEA, FDA recommended a drug last summer. It was very quiet, but they recommended Opana ER. It's an opioid, an oxycodone drug, be pulled from the market because they said, this drug, it's being abused. And we didn't see any benefit over the risks. We recommend you pull it from the market, and the manufacturer just said, fine, we'll pull it. In a market of widespread addiction, where the market is very robust for them to sell a lot of product, and just said, fine, we'll pull it. Because the PR, I think, was going to be worse than if they didn't pull it and fought that thing than if they just did. So they quietly just pulled the drug from the market, which never happens. Does anyone willingly pull a drug from the market because they work so hard to get them on the market and try to sell them? I wouldn't willingly pull one off either. The DEA has made it harder to get some of these drugs. They've scheduled drugs and made them controlled substances that used to not be, like tramadol. They moved Vicodin up to Schedule 2. It's a little bit more difficult. Can't write refills. Used to be 5 refills in 6 months for Vicodin you could write and give you 6 months worth of a prescription at a time. DEA said, no. 1 prescription at a time. No refills. That's the DEA's way of saying, all right, we're going to cut down on that way. And some people say that's appropriate. And some people say, well, I've got chronic pain. The refills saves me 6 trips to the doctor. So some people are burdened by that with chronic pain. But it was viewed at the DEA as a fair trade for those to have an increased burden to cut off the supply to a lot of others. So every one of these actions, policy is a blunt instrument. And then they also do take-back days. Like Dave hosts these on his own, does take-back days because it's the right thing to do. The DEA does these twice a year, spring and fall. There's another one coming up in April to do a drug take-back. Federal funding is starting to flow. It's in the neighborhood of about $600 million flowed out of the feds last year to address this problem. We think that's a great number if it was just for Colorado, that we'd probably be able to solve the problem here if we got that much. Unfortunately, that's for 50 states. So we got 15 million. It was on a formula basis that we got in Colorado. That's not enough to keep Arapahoe House, our largest treatment provider, afloat. They closed down. 5,000 people now can't access treatment in the metro area. So it's a really difficult situation, even with increased federal funding. We think the amount that it would take to really address the problem at the federal level is between 650 and 900 billion. The economists that I talked to, billion. So now we're starting to try, you're getting very close to the T word, which is defense money. Or which one do you want? Do you want a wall, or do you want to solve the opioid crisis? I'll tell you which one I think we should spend the money on. The wall isn't going to work anyway. Guess what? My stuff's coming in, and the largest distributor, people think that that'll stop the flow of drugs. The largest distributor, I flew on an airplane with a DEA agent, and they said, oh yeah, largest distributor in the United States is the United States Postal Service. Second biggest one is FedEx. Third is UPS. All the drugs are coming into the United States through legitimate channels. And if we were to try to intercept and screen every single package coming in, you think that the TSA is bad. You're not getting it. You're not getting overnight deliveries anymore. It's a week. It'll take you a week to get a shipment. So we're not doing it, and a wall is not going to stop a damn thing as far as drugs are concerned. It's symbolic, but it's not stopping a darn thing in terms of drugs. I can tell you it's an impossibility to stop the flow that way. In Colorado, we have a strategic plan. The governor did a convening about 6 years ago and got people together, and smartly, I think, got people together and said, I don't know what to do about this. I saw that number 2 non-medical use thing. I don't like it. What do we do? And got about 80 to 100 people together in roundtables like this. Went around the state, did all these convenings, got people together and said, what do we do? I don't know. I'm a geologist and a brewer and a mayor and a governor. I'm not an opioid guy. And said, you tell me what to do and we'll figure it out. So we created a statewide strategic plan and formed an organization that I run called the Colorado Consortium for Prescription Drug Abuse Prevention, basically the governor's task force to try to address this thing. We gave it to this organization that's a 501c3, nominally housed at the university, but basically something so it isn't labeled as a law enforcement problem or a public health problem or a behavioral health problem or a payment issue or a regulatory issue. If you give it to a state agency, it gets bucketed pretty quickly and siloed. We said, no, do silo busting and put it out in the middle of all of those and have it sit out there and have some fool who's willing to, quit his day job and do this all day, try to run this thing and keep this together and have people working voluntarily. We now have 10 different work groups working on this problem from 10 different angles. And we have about 550 people and would love to have some of you sign up and be part of it. Everything from increasing public awareness, retraining providers, doing safe disposal programs. We have a statewide program. We're putting drop boxes in every county. On the Loxone work group to increase access to the overdose reversing drug that's nearly 100% effective that nobody knows about or has. A heroin response work group that works on the parallel problem of the trafficking of heroin and the switching to heroin. An affected families work group to give voice to people that have been affected by this, which is the most effective voice you're going to hear is someone who has lost a loved one to this or is suffering themselves or in recovery. A recovery work group to promote more pathways into recovery for people, a data and research work group to try to continue to better measure some of those things that we don't think we have like for example, all those deaths counted. We work on how to try to measure things better, get a better understanding, and then be able to measure how well we do. Work on the PDMP to get doctors to use it more, and then work on issues for getting access to treatment. So we're trying to address this from all these different angles, and these groups are all co-chaired by people who are national experts in their field. We have a lot of brain power in Colorado, a lot of dedicated, really smart, really excellent people in Colorado, and would love to have all of you join one of these work groups and take part in this work. A couple examples. The Safe Disposal Work Group created a couple of years ago a program to try to get a one drop box, a permanent one like Dave has, in every county. So far we have 47 counties and 93 boxes out of last October. I don't think we're quite going to make all 64 from our last numbers because we're tallying them up now from what we were able to do in the last quarter of last year. But we're getting close. We're over 50 boxes, and we almost got to all 64 counties because that's something we know we have to do is change behavior, get people when they're done to take the meds back, don't keep them in the medicine cabinet. I know people think, I paid for it, and what if I need it later? I might need that later and not be able to get it. And I laugh saying, your bigger problem is you might get more. You might get overprescribed again. That's why you have what you have left. You shouldn't have what you have left. Or you got too many. By definition, you should get rid of that stuff. And it's much more of a danger to have those 20 tablets in your medicine cabinet than ever to save them. Far better. It really is. Loaded gun on the counter. It's just, that's what you're doing. So I will not have them in my home, period, under any circumstance. There's a map in there. You can go into takemedsback.org and click on the closest take-back location. This one will direct you down to the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Department. Take a right, go into Dave's office, and drop them on his desk. And there's a drop box. You'll get to the drop box before you get to his desk. But drop them there. And please do visit the Arapahoe. He's been collecting this stuff for a long time. He was one of the first adopters and goes out and tells other sheriffs about this, that this is what you've got to do. Dave's very forward-thinking. He doesn't look too bright. Oh, he's not here. Darn it. Damn it. I saved this up, and he's not here for the punchline. Anyway, but he is bright despite that. Anyway, despite appearances. We have a provider education work group, and we know what you've said was absolutely true. We have to retrain all the providers. The difficulty is continuing education is not compulsory for doctors. Colorado is one of the few states that does not have a mandatory CME law for docs. Even if they did, the topics aren't mandatory, so it wouldn't be necessarily getting training. So we're trying to work at the federal level to say if you want to write a controlled substance prescription, you have to know more than you do. You have to be trained to a certain level to do that. So we're going around the state doing, I do a lot of these talks. We did 17 of these last year for doctors all over the state. 50 docs in Alamosa, 53 in Gunnison, 52 doctors down in Durango. We're going to La Jara, Trinidad, Walsenburg, Sterling, Summit County, Steamboat, everywhere we go, all across the state to canvass the state and teach as many providers as possible about this issue and to prescribe less. So we're working on it. It takes a lot, though. We train 125 doctors a year at the CU Med School, 125. There's 24,000 prescribers in Colorado. It's very hard to reach them all. And the ones that have the biggest problem and don't know very much and are kind of lousy practitioners, by definition, never go back and get more schooling. That's why they're not so smart, because they don't go back for more schooling. They're like, hey, I'm done. I'm going to practice like I did in 1962, and I'm just going to keep going. And those are the docs that scare me. Like, hey, you never thought you needed some CE to learn about the new stuff? It kind of scares me, but we're trying to do that while as we wait for the FDA and the DEA to require that of doctors, which is what we're lobbying for. We have, again, a collaboration with Rocky Mountain HIDA, ATF, DEA, and when I say the real cops, no disrespect to Dave, but these are the guys that drive up and down I-25, pulling over semi-trucks, and guys get out with AK-47s, pointing them at them because they're shipping, 2,000 pounds of heroin up into Colorado. And they have giant busts like that. So it's a big deal to try to collaborate with them, because these guys, even them, they want to get users into treatment. They want to bust the high-level dealers that are really peddling this stuff, getting more people addicted. Those are the people we're trying to interdict on. It does not help to try to arrest somebody who's a user. It's just not going to help anybody. But so we're trying to work on that with our law enforcement partners. Again, I mentioned the Affected Families Work Group. The Attorney General is trying to equip everybody with naloxone. It's a near-perfect antidote. It's a nasal spray called nasal Narcan that you can easily reverse somebody. If you can use Afrin nasal spray, you can save somebody's life with naloxone. Yes?
What is your thought about that sheriff in Indiana who says he wants to charge repeat offenders for the use of
use naloxone. I think it's insane. It's like saying you're going to start, well, some places do. We're not coming back to your house if your house is on fire, if it was on fire before. Sorry, we're not coming next time. It's kind of, well, we have public services or we don't. You know, that's my opinion, is either you have public services or you don't have public services. You don't tell people if you have bad luck, or it's because somebody, and that's discriminating against somebody with a disease. And I would go after them and say, hey, that person has a disease. The science is clear. The person just needs a good lawyer. Unfortunately, people with addictions are usually broke and don't have good lawyers. If they did, they'd have really good grounds under ADA to say, you cannot do that to me. Thank you. So it's, that's what I would do. But I just think it's terrible. And again, you're sentencing people to death. That you have a drug to save their life, and you're going to deny them that life-saving drug when you have it. Seems immoral, unethical, and illegal to me. Seems like all three, but I don't know. There's also an app you can get on your phone. I don't mind if you get on your phone right now in the middle. Get on the phone and download the app called Opie Rescue. It's a free app that will show you what an overdose looks like. You'd be surprised how often they happen in bathrooms of hotels, businesses, libraries, parks, school parking lots, school bathrooms. These are the places in Colorado where overdoses have happened in the last year. In Colorado, this happens. You may happen upon somebody that has an opioid overdose. It would not shock me if you happened upon someone who you thought was passed out, and that's why they passed out. And if you had naloxone or there was some nearby, we say there should be naloxone everywhere there's a fire extinguisher and an AED. There ought to be naloxone in a box, so you can grab that thing and give them a squirt of that in their nose. And you don't have to have any medical training. That's all you have to know how to do. Squirt that in their nose, and you just saved their life. So we're trying to equip everybody with naloxone. And you'd be surprised, how many people are close to someone who either has a use disorder or is taking a high dose of opioids or whatever. So you should be aware of it at least and talk to people about it. There's a lot of regional coalitions and a lot of groups now that are talking about this, this is the best development there could be. When Rotary start talking about this, and Kiwanis and everybody else that says, hey, we are the communities, we have to listen and figure out what to do about it as a community, we will make progress. That's where the real progress is going to be made, is at the community level. The state can just try to remove barriers, try to get the hell out of the way. It's the best thing the state could do, is get the hell out of the way of people and let them live their lives and try to help as much as possible, but get the hell out of the way. And that's what we're trying to do, is enable things, remove some of those things, and put guardrails where they make sense for doctors to not overprescribe. And last but not least, our state legislature has an interim study committee on opioid and other substance use disorders. 10 legislators started meeting last summer. Chaired by Brittany Pedersen, a representative from Lakewood whose mom is a recovering heroin addict and is a person in recovery, and Colonel Kent Lambert, senator from El Paso County, the chair of the Joint Budget Committee, who's as far right as you're going to get. Brittany is roughly as far left as you're going to get, maybe except for Irene. They're both pretty far left. And then Perry Buck is way out on the right. And you got some moderates like Kennedy and Priola and folks like that in the middle. But a really good group of legislators representing both parties, both chambers, and they worked on this issue for about 50 months, felt like it at the time. 50 hours of meetings and hearings over the summer and fall when they're out of session to learn about this, hear from experts, hear from patients. What do we need to do? What are we not doing? How could the state do more? And they came up with 6 bills that passed out of committee. 1 to do prevention and better education with doctors and patients. 1 to change clinical practice for the better, limiting doctors to 7 days for a first opioid prescription for someone who's not on them already. So this isn't chronic pain patients. It's the first-time use. Don't give people more than 7 days to start with. And if you need to, then give them another prescription. Harm reduction, which is give naloxone to schools, libraries, wherever the naloxone is needed, and create a site for safe use. And it's very controversial, but people are publicly injecting right now. I would bet any amount of money that up and down Arapahoe Road, there are people publicly injecting today. I absolutely, and Dave will tell you this is true. There are people in Arapahoe County publicly injecting right now. And the average heroin user, it takes 5 to 7 injections a day. The average cocaine injector, 12 to 14 times a day that they have to inject. And they're doing it in bathrooms and parking lots and alleyways and behind schools, and that's where they're doing this. And there's a bill proposing to have a safe use site where someone can go out of public view into a safe facility supervised by a medical professional to be able to use and then be taught how to care for wounds, exchange their syringes and needles so we don't spread HIV and hepatitis C, which are making a strong comeback because of this heroin epidemic. Now we're seeing upticks in HIV and hep C, which we don't want. And we're seeing people go to the emergency room for an abscess, treat the abscess for $3,000 in the emergency room, which could be prevented with an alcohol swab for 2 cents. So shouldn't we pay the 2 cents and have a safe use place? And when Kent Lambert gets up and says, he is the co-prime sponsor of that bill in the Senate, Kent Lambert, and he got up and said, look, this sounds bad. You hear all the pejorative terms, shooting gallery, junkies, all the terrible terms that are totally inaccurate and wrong. But he gets up and says, it's going to make people uncomfortable, but we have to consider it because this is that bad. And when he gets up and says it, listen. To convince Kent Lambert of anything like that, that's a good idea, that harm reduction and safe use is a good idea, it must be worth considering, is my view. And that bill passed 10-0 out of the interim committee. Then we have one on workforce development to try to get more counselors into the field, one on treatment to hopefully draw down the federal benefit. There's a 70% federal match available for treatment for Medicaid that we don't take down. We would have to invest 40 or 50 million. But we would pick up another 110, 120 from the feds if we did that. Could make a real dent in the treatment problem, reduce the treatment gap by 30% overnight. But we've got to pony up $40 million. And get the legislature to pony up $40 million for anything is very difficult. I understand the competing priorities, but Christ, we're in an epidemic that is driving down the lifespan. This is important. And then payment reform, dealing with issues of coverage and trying to remove prior authorizations for things like opioid alternatives. Don't make it so hard to get chiropractic or PT or anything else like that. Make it a little harder to get opioids and a little easier to get the other stuff. And that would help. So we're trying to work on all those things at the legislature. There's various ones. This one's being heard next week in committee on Thursday, a week from Thursday. It's being heard. So we're working on those things now. And so we have a very dedicated group of people trying to do this at the state level. And I apologize for going so long. I just, again, wanted to try to give you a lot of info that might be useful, hopefully. And I would deputize all of you and say, go home, clean out your medicine cabinet, and tell one other person. If you can do those 2 things for me, this will have been a huge success. So. Nice. Nice. Gotta love it. Yep. Any safe storage is a good thing. Thank you.
So we've got a couple of jobs left for you, but they're pretty easy.
Yay.
First is, actually this isn't a job, but one of our focuses with Rotary is literacy. We work with a charter school up in North Denver, so when we donate books to them, we put book plates in honor of our speakers. So that's a reproduction of that book plate.
Awesome.
So very nice. So get your name out there.
Thank you.
And the second is we run a little legal lottery here, and we need you to pull the ticket. And the last 3 digits are 231.
I got it.
Oh, not Phil. Sheriff Dave. All right. So hold it high.
$10.
Make sure you give that to Dave.
Nice.
I checked. No one's in there. It's over 600.
One more.
650-ish.
Oh, too bad. Rob, thank you very much. We'll be talking again soon as we work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks, everybody.
So could you all join me in the 4-way test? For all we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Do good and have fun.